Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, John and Lee proudly present the greatest wrestling show ever!
Hey guys, welcome to episode 7 of the greatest wrestling show ever with myself, John, and Lee. We're on to episode number 7, which is The Miz and Daniel Bryan wrestling for the US title. So potentially a slightly, I don't know if the word controversial is right, but maybe it's not the most obvious of choices. It's a B pay-per-view from 2010, but it gets Daniel Bryan in there, gets the US title in there. It's a good match, a long feud. You happy with this conclusion, Lee?
Yeah, you took the words on and off there. Gets Daniel Bryan in and he gets another title, ticks off the list.
Exactly, yeah. Surprising, isn't it? Especially the US titles. Obviously, a fair proportion of the US titles history was outside of WWE. So in WWE, there's only a limited number of matches. And as soon as you take out the likes of, say, Cena and people like that and whoever else, it doesn't leave you with all that much, does it? But we'll get cracking. So we're on Night of Champions 2010 on the WWE Network. If you're watching along, just go to the Daniel Bryan versus The Miz chapter. It's 40 minutes and 11 seconds into the pay-per-view as a whole. So let's press play in 3, 2, 1, go. Hang on. That's all right. My headphones weren't plugged in properly there. You shouldn't have heard that bell. Vince will be getting us kicked off Facebook again, won't he? Last week, the video version of this went on the Facebook page and within minutes was rejected after a copyright claim from WWE, which surprised me because I wouldn't have thought they'd be able to hear anything on it. I don't know if that's what it was or if, I don't know. I don't know what it was, to be honest.
Yeah, there must be a code within the sound, and anything that gets picked up or detected at all triggers something.
I'm surprised even though they could pick anything up.
I thought it was quite exciting.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe Vince has just got it in for us. So anyway, Miz is coming out. So at this point, Miz is US champion, defending, and he is the Money in the Bank winner. He won Money in the Bank the previous, I think it was July. Cashed it in a couple of months later against Randy Orton to win his first and to date only World Championship. I quite like the Miz at this point. I mean, I quite like him now as well, but he very much felt on the ascendancy. You know, you obviously missed all this, didn't you, Lee?
Yeah, he's a great character, and Mike.
He's his real name. I thought for a minute. I thought for a minute you're going all insider there, just talking about Mike, because Mike is his real name, but you mean he's good on the microphone, don't you?
Yes. Yeah, I'm not too keen on his current thing with John Morrison and the thing they've got going with Otis, but that's just personal preference.
So you obviously missed that as well. That's where the Miz first rose to prominence in his team with John Morrison in around about 2007. For a year or two, they were initially thrown together because they were both contestants on Tough Enough, and despite not necessarily having the most obviously sort of team-worthy similarities, they made a good team. I think, if I remember correctly, possibly one of them had a singles title at the same time and they were tag team champions for a period of months. They did the Dirt Sheet, which was a YouTube series with their own creation. So Daniel Bryan's out now as well. Daniel Bryan and The Miz. I've actually wrestled Daniel Bryan. Have I ever told you this?
I think you have, but I think you should tell us again.
Yes, I wrestled him at Butlins in Skegness in late 2005, I think it was. So for a period, Daniel Bryan was, he'd done a number of tours in the UK, but during that year, he was over here for several months. And I remember actually, it wasn't long after, I think he just lost the Ring of Honor World title. Now I'm thinking about the time after when he came back again. He just lost the Ring of Honor title and came over here for a tour and was gone for America for a number of months. And I saw a number of places on the internet where people were basically wondering where he was, if he'd gone into hiding, if he'd gone wherever. And the answer was no, he's wrestling in Butlins in the UK.
The highlight of his career.
My main memory from that match is I accidentally sat on his head quite hard.
Oh,
yeah, wasn't ideal.
Did he punish you for that? Or?
No, he was fine. I did also get bollocks afterwards by Robbie Brookside, who's now one of the head trainers at NXT. And I was good friends with Robbie. I actually got on really well with him. But when I came back into the dressing room afterwards, I made a mistake in that we were both heading towards the shower at the same time. And I initially said, after you, gestured him in first. And he went, no, after you. So I was like, okay, fair enough. That's what he's told me to do. So I started heading to the shower. And Robbie gave me a bollocking because with Daniel Bryan being the senior member of team to me, I should have then let him go first. That was in the same dressing room as well, where Robbie Brookside also made me stand on a table with my trousers around my ankles. I can't quite remember why that was. I walked back in after a match. I was on different occasions when I wrestled Daniel Bryan, but I walked back into the changing room at Skegness, and he just said, right, Johnny Midnight on the table, trousers on your ankles. I was like, okay. I think possibly testing to see what my reaction was. So the backstory.
So is it fair to call Daniel a legend, or is that overkill?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely up there. I mean, he's not. I mean, when he was.
Obviously, he's no rock age, but
yeah. When he was in that 2013-14 sort of feud with the Authority, Stephanie McMahon particularly referred to him as a B+ player. And whilst I think that's a little bit harsh, I don't know if he's an A+, maybe an A-. You know, he's a fantastic wrestler, a great character.
He's had beef with Triple H, hasn't he, in the past? So that could be.
He's up there, as, you know, from a technical perspective. You could definitely make an argument he's one of the greatest of all time. And in theory, he's got most of the attributes. He's good on the mic. He connects well with the crowd. Potentially only let down by his overall look and lack of size, really. Perhaps if he looked like, say, a Randy Orton and was able to do what he does now and still look that way, maybe we consider at that very top level. It's funny, I do
love watching him wrestle, I have to say.
The WrestleMania 30, which again you'll have missed, but you may have seen since, when Daniel Bryan won the World Heavyweight title in the main event, at the press conference beforehand, they showed the four main people. So it was going to be Triple H versus Daniel Bryan in the first match. If Daniel Bryan wins, he gets the main event, which was Batista contending against Randy Orton, was going to turn into a triple threat. So the press conference revolved around Triple H, Daniel Bryan, Batista and Randy Orton, and they all turned up in their suits, and Daniel Bryan looked like he'd borrowed it from his big brother. He's about a foot shorter than the rest of them. They're all big, handsome guys with amazing physiques, and he definitely stood out somewhat there.
Excellent.
So
at this point,
say again?
Who's the guy outside the ring?
He's called Alex Riley. So to give you a little bit of the backstory to this, the reason that the Miz and Daniel Bryan are feuding is when Daniel Bryan first signed to WWE, he didn't go to developmental. Florida Championship Wrestling was known then. He was pretty much called straight up to the main roster. And he was put into a new reality TV style game show they created called NXT. So that was the origin of the NXT brand. Fun fact for you, NXT was actually trademarked for wrestling purposes by a promotion in Scotland. They used that for their sort of training school shows. So WWE had to buy that off them for what I understand was in the Scottish wrestling scene anyway, a fairly substantial amount of money. But anyway, so the basic gist of NXT was that a bunch of rookies who actually had somewhere between maybe 3 and, in Daniel Bryan's case, 10 years of experience in the independent scene, were paired with pros, so wrestlers currently in WWE, and The Miz was paired with Daniel Bryan, with the overwhelming sort of storyline there being that whilst The Miz had been in WWE for a number of years, he was considerably less experienced as a wrestler overall, and most would say considerably less good as a wrestler than Daniel Bryan was.
Yeah.
But The Miz was tasked both, I would say, in reality and within the storyline of helping Daniel Bryan create some degree of persona, to become more confident, to take what was a relatively plain-looking and uninteresting character and make something of it.
Interesting. Yeah, because sorry, go on.
I do actually have in front of me a potted history of the Miz and Daniel Bryan feud. So Just scrolling back to the start of it. So, wow, April 2002, Miz, a contestant on Real World spin-off, gets wasted celebrating his 21st birthday. Quite sure why that's relevant. Bryan, at the same time, is performing as the off-masked American Dragon, is winning the East Coast Wrestling Association tag belts with eventual indie luminary Loki. And then fast forward to December 2004, Miz is on Tough Enough. Daniel Bryan wrestles Jamie Noble in a WWE tryout. By January 2006, The Miz is more or less, as we know today, was crudely introduced to the world, performing in OVW, starting up Miz TV. Daniel Bryan's the Ring of Honor World Champion at that point. Scrolls through then to 2010, Daniel Bryan signed, and there we go, February 23rd, 2010. In what could be viewed as a rivalry's true date of origin, WWE airs its premiere episode of NXT. Miz, acting as a pro, selects Bryan as his rookie from a crop including Ryback, Wade Barrett, and Heath Slater. Bryan goes out to try to upset no less than Chris Jericho. I remember that. Daniel Bryan had Chris Jericho had a match on that first episode of NXT. And in it, I've never known if this was a planned spot or not. Bryan goes for a tope, a dive through the ropes. And Chris Jericho kind of half catches him and turns him. So he lands back first on the ringside table, or the announcer's table, in what looks to be a very painful landing. And I've never known if that was a planned spot or went a little bit wrong.
So he turned Daniel Bryan landed on his back, or
He almost landed stood up with his back against the announcer's table, if you can imagine what I mean. He turns him in midair and lands, but not lands stood still. He lands back, hitting heavily against the announcer's table.
Oh yeah.
Fast forward to May 31st, 2010. In WWE, basically anyone with a whim can masquerade as on-screen booker. Raw guest star Ashton Kutcher sets up the first ever one-on-one match between mentor in his own mind Miz and theoretical prodigy Bryan. There's no arguing that Miz, who took the L that night, was putting his seasoned colleague over. Miz would essentially repeat the formula against his NXT underling Alex Riley that summer. So the reason Alex Riley is here partnered with The Miz is they're into season 2 of NXT, and Alex Riley is his rookie for that. June the 7th, 2010, Bryan, now a member of the insurgent alum stable known as Nexus. So in the storyline, the NXT rookies were fed up with how they were being treated, and possibly in real life as well. They stormed Raw, dismantled the ring, tore it to pieces, attacked John Cena, and Bryan was caught on cameras ringside choking out ring announcer Justin Roberts with his own tie and spitting on him, for which he was actually fired in real life. So I believe Vince gave him a call afterwards and fired him. But he then returned at SummerSlam for the 7-on-7 main event, teaming with R-Truth, John Cena, Edge, Bret Hart, Chris Jericho against the other 7 members of Nexus. And then here we go, September 19, 2010, Bryan once again gets the best of his supposed superior, spoiler alert, conquering Miz and taking his US Championship at Night of Champions. Miz, as mentioned before, admirably winning Money in the Bank briefcase and cashing in a couple months later on Randy Orton and becoming WWE Champion. So at this stage, I think the only real feud between them is over their interactions on NXT.
So the choking of the ring announcer and the spitting on wasn't a spot?
No, I think he just, they were told to storm the ring and attack everyone and destroy stuff and make it look good, and he just did it in the moment, thinking nothing of it. But they'd relatively recently gone to be PG at that point, and I believe that the pressure was felt from sponsors that sort of thing wasn't acceptable to be on TV, and therefore they felt they had to fire him. And he generally was fired. He returned to the indie scene for a month or 2 or what have you, only to appear as a surprise at SummerSlam.
Ooh.
And then the feud rolls on and off for years. So the following April 2011, Miz defended his WWE Championship against John Cena in the main event after interference from The Rock. Runs through to April 2012, the following WrestleMania. Daniel Bryan famously loses the World Heavyweight Championship to Sheamus in 18 seconds. To be honest, there's less interaction here over the years, and I seem to remember them being quite regularly matched together. I think it's a lot in that first year, then a few bits and bobs over the years, and then that feud they had about 2 years ago after Daniel Bryan returned.
Yeah. Fun fact.
Go on then.
Daniel Bryan was once Peter's most animal-friendly athlete.
Who's most animal-friendly athlete?
Peter.
Oh, yeah.
P-E-T-A.
Right, okay. So how does that work? Why was it him?
Well, Shane Keegan. He's
Well, he is.
animal rights.
Did they select him as being the most animal-friendly athlete? Is that where that fact's come from?
Yeah, and quite publicly animal-friendly. And obviously he's quite, at the time, he'll have been quite massively in the public eye as well.
Okay, cool. Well, it's fair. I can't think of any other massively eco-friendly athletes. So, little Miz fact for you. I stole one of Miz's moves when I used to wrestle. So he does a clothesline in the corner. I think he still does it. You know, where the opponent stood in the corner facing inwards towards the ring, and he runs and clotheslines them, and his legs go through the ropes. Well, I used to do that, but then I leveled it up a little bit by, there we go. He's tapped out already.
Wow.
Yeah. We've mentioned absolutely nothing at all about the match. I think it was quite good. Used to run and jump, hit that clothesline, slide through the ropes, and as the opponent stepped forward into the ring, I'd hit a bulldog off the top rope. It was like the Miz's move, but better. So, new United States champion Daniel Bryan. Who's been your favourite United States champion, Lee?
I'd have to say Daniel Bryan.
Is that because you can't think of anyone else?
I'll just try to think of either. Oh no, AJ actually.
Yeah.
AJ is I'd say my favourite wrestler of the current era.
AJ Styles has never done a massive amount for me. I don't know why.
Oh, I think it's brilliant.
I'll tell you one thing that slightly put me off AJ a few years ago. It's a slightly random thing, but there was a wrestler on the UK scene called Lionheart, who sadly actually committed suicide about a year or so ago. And he wasn't a friend of mine or anything like that. The one time I met him, actually, we didn't get on all that great, but it was someone I was aware of. And in a match with AJ Styles about 5 years ago, AJ went for Styles Crash. As he went to hit it, just instinct kicked in and Lionheart tucked his chin like he taught to do to take most moves, which meant that obviously he landed heavily on his head and it broke his neck. And he was paralysed in the ring, and he came back eventually and what have you. But I remember the next day seeing some people had shared on Facebook a video taken from ringside of it happening, like fan footage of that cyclist being delivered, clearly badly injured, AJ standing over him. And then a few weeks later, AJ was on Chris Jericho's podcast, and so someone mentioned that his recollection of the whole incident wasn't quite what had happened. So I had to listen to it. And a tiny little thing, but he said that he hadn't realised that this guy was injured until he got back to America. And I was like, I've seen the footage. You could tell he was injured. You stood over him for a number of seconds or a minute. And to me, it just always struck me as a very odd thing to say. And I couldn't quite fathom why he said it. And
how could you say he was injured?
He was lying on the floor, couldn't move. I think the second you hit the Styles Clash, if you hit the Styles Clash with someone with their chin tucked, you know about it straight away. Yeah, so anyway, a random thing there. So I'll give you a few other US champions over the years. Obviously, if you go far enough back, people like Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat hold it in the late 70s, early 80s before they moved up to the world title scene. Then if you're looking more late 80s through to early 90s, you've got the likes of Lex Luger, Sting, Barry Windham, Goldberg, Bret Hart, etc. held it in the late 90s. And then if you're going to go through to
the WCW thing then.
Say again?
Those names you just read out then, so I'm assuming late 80s, early 90s, it was a WCW title?
It was, yeah, that's in WCW. So when WWEF bought WCW in March of 2001, they got the titles as well, and the titles came over. The reigning champion at that point was Booker T, who'd won the US title at March 18th, 2001 Greed pay-per-view. he was then, he gave it on SmackDown on July 24th to Canyon, who then dropped it to various people. It went through Kurt Angle, Edge, Eddie Guerrero, John Cena held it, Chris Benoit, Matt Hardy, etc. But I could possibly argue that Daniel Bryan could be one of the best US champions of at least of the recent era. If you're interested, Daniel Bryan lost this US title that he'd won in the match we just watched. Following March, so a reasonably lengthy title reign of 177 days, he lost it to Sheamus on Raw. Interestingly, a year later, he was losing the world title to Sheamus in a WrestleMania.
Oh.
It's funny that that title match they had at WrestleMania, first match out, it lasted 18 seconds, but it was Daniel Bryan versus Sheamus for the world title. And I've had matches with both of them. So I thought maybe I should message Vince and ask if I could be inserted and make it a triple threat. And I beat Sheamus as well, so.
Yes, I do know that.
Unfortunately, Vince didn't get the memo. Okay, right, so that was relatively short and sweet. We've moved on to some sort of diva parade now. We need to decide what we're covering in next week's match. Was that a good match there, that Daniel Bryan mismatch? I don't think I actually paid any attention whatsoever to it.
The bits that I saw, it looked quite high octane, good action.
Okay, so we've just had a title match. If we're looking to sort of alternate a little bit between title matches and non-title matches, then non-title matches we've still got left are Bret Hart and Steve Austin in a submission match from WrestleMania 13. We've got Undertaker, Shawn Michaels from WrestleMania 25. We've got Money in the Bank from WrestleMania 22. And then the rest are all title matches. So possibly one of those a non-title match next, do you think?
Yeah. I think we're due a really, really good match, aren't we?
Undertaker, Shawn Michaels.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Shawn Michaels originally trained Daniel Bryan. I don't know if you know that.
Rather than just to tick it off the list.
Yeah, let's do it. It's a big one, that. Undertaker, Shawn Michaels. So, guys, anyone listening at home, hope you enjoyed that. Let us know if you did. If you didn't, keep it to yourself. Comment on any Facebook posts or however else you can get hold of us. We probably should set up like a Twitter account or something as well, shouldn't we?
Yeah, I'll come to that.
Yeah, I'll get around to it. Right, guys. So that was episode 7. Hope you enjoyed that.